Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another session of podcast. I wish and I'm sure you will enjoy listening to the Blues.
Let's take a step back and just look at how the body uses glucose. Now, glucose, it's also called, diabetes is related to sugar. And in a lot of languages, it's called as a sugar disease or a sweet disease. So let's go back to the base of this, that is glucose, and understand first, how does glucose really affect the body? Why do we need glucose? How does glucose metabolize in the body? Only then can we understand what is diabetes, and we can probably, once we understand this disease better, we can look at better remedies. So sir, over to you. Could you just explain to us how does glucose affect the body? Why is glucose needed? How does the body metabolize glucose?
We have already spoken one program about carbohydrate.
Right, yeah.
What's carbohydrate and
Right.
all that. So glucose is the monomer, a single molecule. We have around 100 trillion cells in our body. That's about 10 lakh crores of human cells consist in a human body. And every cell has to have an energy source
Right.
to run,
Right.
to function, to work.
The fuel for it.
Yeah,
the
it's
cell.
basically the DNA and RNA of the cell has to drive itself. So it requires an energy source for it. That is what is glucose. So we have had programs on rice, we have programs on sugar, wheat, milk,
Right.
all our carbohydrate family. So the glucose is a carbohydrate family. So what happens here is that every cell individually requires glucose. So it's 100 trillion cells individually has to be supplied with glucose. It is such a huge work which beyond the human comprehension.
Right.
So whatever food that we eat, so it gets, the gastro works this way. It gets into the stomach, it gets grounded into pulp with the help of acids from the 4 different acids from the liver and the saliva while eating. Converted into pulp, goes to the intestines. Only the single molecules will be absorbed of all types. So when it comes to the question of carbohydrates, so the glucose, the galactose, the fructose are absorbed. Whatever the intestine absorbs, it all through the portal vein go to the liver. And from the liver, it gets scanned and sent out to the blood. And the blood starts supplying the glucose to the human cells. This is what exactly happens. But then what happens to this glucose is something called glucose transport system, which is called the GLUT. They call it short form as glucose transport. Yeah, there are 5 glucose transport system: GLUT1, GLUT2, GLUT3, GLUT4, and GLUT5. GLUT4 is the one which requires insulin. That is for the skeletal body, the muscular tissues.
Muscular tissues and bones.
GLUT1 is for the RBC. It's a protein transport. GLUT2 is for the brain nervous system and all that kind of some of the internal organs and what that's a protein transport system. GLUT3 is for cardiovascular and other major. They cannot wait for insulin. So it's a protein transport. GLUT4, as I said, is an insulin dependent for the skeletal body. GLUT5 is basically for kidney and intestines and all that. That's a sodium transport.
Okay.
Yeah, each cell has to receive the glucose. That is, there are a lot of signaling systems and all that involved. It's a very big subject. With respect to modern science, they have gone minute and seen this what's happening. So what exactly happens when the glucose is received by the human cell? The human cell has a cytoplasm. It is a gel-like stuff. You have RNA, you have DNA, you have mitochondria, you have lysosome. There are so many components are there inside the cell. All these guys are floating in the gel. They don't have fixed stuff. Yeah. If you go cellular biology and see, it will be very interesting. So the mitochondria alone has its own membrane. There are 2 membranes. There's an intermediate space. They have 2 membranes for itself. The cell has a membrane for itself. The mitochondria has its own membrane. Right. It has 2 membranes. It has inside the mitochondria, there are 5 highly complicated protein structure which we cannot understand. Now, this is being studied now in the last 30 years by the quantum biology in a very beautiful manner. So, if you take the biochemistry part of it, the glucose by the Krebs cycle in the cell gets broken into peroxides. That is C3. C6 becomes C3. A glucose is C6H12O6. It's broken into two halves, C3. Then there is a nanotube. So, in this Krebs cycle itself, a few ATP is born, that I'll tell you later. Then this broken peroxide is sent inside the mitochondria. So, mitochondria has C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, 5 compartments in which this fellow is run. They have nanomotors having more than 6,000 RPM. It's called electron transport chain. This action is called the oxidative phosphorylation, the cellular respiration. What's happening inside? So they run only the electron. So it's a very elaborative stuff. There are two aspects of it. One is NADH to NAD, and then ADP, ATP synthase, and ATP. Here FAD, FADH, and ADP and ATP synthase and ATP. This is I don't want to go into this very detailed part of it.
Yeah.
They run all the electrons, and then that's why it's called electron transport chain. All the proton gets pumped out. These protons are positive ones, which the body cannot. It can do damage to our body. So, as I said, that intermediate space of the mitochondria
between the membranes, both the membranes.
Yeah, both the membrane. It's held very carefully. So, your glucose in the end, which is broken into pyruvate, is converted to phosphate group. This is some kind of an alchemy. A glucose is getting converted to phosphate group. ATP it's called.
ATP.
Adenosine triphosphate.
Right.
That's a high energy currency. Each glucose gets converted to 38 ATP. This 38 ATP is the one which drives your cell, which is the energy currency for the cell to function.
For the cell to function.
Yeah, but the thing is that this is studied in a laboratory condition
Right.
by having a general epithelial cell and seeing the whole works. But the scientists are still not sure whether what they study in the laboratory condition, what happens same inside the body, same number of ATP are produced or more or less, which they are not sure. Second thing is you have different types of cells in the body. Heart cells, brain cell, pancreatic cell, liver cell, and so on. So, which we do not know. Each cell, how many number of ATP they are producing, whether it varies from one cell to another cell, which they are not sure of it. But by and large, this is the concept in which the entire biochemistry is working. But then the glucose metabolism as such is overall stuff. If you take, it is divided into four categories. They divide. They frame four categories there. One is glycolysis. The other one is glycogenesis. The other one is glycogenolysis. The fourth one is glyconeogenesis. Glycolysis is what I explained to you.
Right.
The glucose coming into your blood and then through protein transport system, or it's transported to human cells and all. Overall, this thing is called glycolysis. So as we eat and when glucose comes into the blood and gets transported, the excess glucose and all are converted into glycogen. Like how rice and wheat I've explained to you.
Right, yeah.
Linear chain of glucose, hundreds and thousands of them with 1-4 glycosidic bonding. The same thing, they store it in the liver, the glycogen, and also they store it in the skeletal part of the body. This is glycogenesis. Glycogenolysis is when we are not eating for a longer period of time, when we are sleeping, we need glucose. So this what happens is the alpha cells of the pancreas has 4 types of cells. Gamma cells, which is called the polypeptide cell, alpha cell, beta cell, and delta cell. So polypeptide cell produces a hormone which has 36 different types of amino acids to regulate alpha, beta, and delta cells. Alpha cells produce glucagon, beta cells produce insulin amylin, delta cell produces somatostatin. There are 3 different types of hormone they produce. Alpha cell produces glucagon. This glucagon comes in to the blood and then it releases this glycogen when the sugar is needed to the body, when you are not eating. You need energy source, right? Continuously you need energy source. So that is called genolysis, glycogenolysis.
A delayed energy source
Yeah.
in layman language.
Yeah. They'll break it into single monomers and keep throwing it in the blood as a glucose glycophosphate. Glucose phosphate group, it will put it in the blood so that the cells can absorb. Gluconeogenesis is something very, very important. Gluconeogenesis is when we are not eating, when there is no source available, all the glycogen is over, then what happens? Your heart and the brain has to go. They cannot stop. They stop, you die. Then the neogenesis come into play. Anything, any carbon group of components in the body will be converted into glucose. This is the absolute beauty of the human body. But this is done only by the liver cell and the kidney cells, not any other system. It will keep the heart and the brain going.
So does it use the fat in the body to convert it into
Yeah, fat is nothing other than a heavy molecule of C55, H106 and O6. It's a carbon group there, which will be converted to glucose.
will be converted to glucose?
Yeah. It will be converted to glucose. Even some of the lipids and protein, whatever they have carbon, will be converted to, that is neogenesis, gluconeogenesis. This is how the whole system works.
Right.
And as you eat and your glucose rises up when it reaches the blood, within no time it serves the whole body and then bring back the glucose to some number,
Okay.
some level. Like you cannot drop down on glucose.
Yeah.
Hypoglycemia. If you go below 20, you go to coma. Anything beyond 400, 500, 600 and all that, it is not good. But at the same time, sugar is the glucose part of the blood glucose is not something which is a fixed one. It keeps varying. Suppose somebody is at the age of 50, 55, meets all his old school friends, and then they remember all the old and they start cracking jokes and painfully laughing with the stomach paining and all that, sharing the old memories and all that. They are in such joy and happiness or whatever. At that time, sugar shoots to 600. Yeah. When you see a tiger, all of a sudden you'll be in a state of shock that you want to run and survive, escape. Okay? That day, the run what you take, you would have never ran in your life.
Right. Adrenaline.
Yeah, adrenaline will come.
Will get
it will
pumped
just
into the
release the glycogen from the liver into the bloodstream. That time the glucose may go up to 800, 900 also. It won't harm you.
It won't harm, right.
Yeah. You will get all the energy in the world to do something beyond your physical capacity. But the physical capacity is built in you. But you have not exercised it before because you have not met a tiger before.
Right.
So sugar is a fluctuating part of it, the blood glucose. That is basically based on your emotions. When you are in grief, when you are in fear, when you are sad, when you are experiencing pain, when you are in joy, when you are in happiness, when you are in anxiety, the sugar fluctuates.
True.
So this is how the whole system works. And anything to do with glucose metabolism, whatever that we have understood so far with the help of modern science, is absolutely correct to a large extent. But we do not know why the glucose imbalance is happening, the cause for it.
Okay.
Because when you know the cause, you can cure it. You don't know the cause. So this is how the whole glucose system is positioned. The glucose part of the body is positioned. Why do you need glucose? How the glucose is processed? What are the four major stuff? All these things.
So when you say glucose imbalance, you're talking about the imbalance of actually the conversion of the glucose to ATP. molecules.
No, that doesn't happen. As you get the glucose into the human cell, it gets converted.
Okay.
That's not a problem. Anything goes wrong, it becomes a dirt material and the lysosome take it in and discharge it later.
Okay.
It
So
is only the free radicals born at the fourth chamber of the mitochondria may destroy this, may damage the cell of this protein, because human body is negatively charged, earth is negatively charged, human cell is negatively charged. Body will not like anything positively charged. In an atom, the electrons are negatively charged, the protons are positively charged. The protons, which is held in the intermediate space of the mitochondria membrane, where the cellular respiration comes into play, the blood comes and supply oxygen there, and this oxygen goes and joins this hydrogen proton and convert that into water. So you produce water. If you run a marathon of 42 kilometers, you produce something like 600 to 700 ml of water by cellular respiration. Okay. This is how the whole body works, according to the modern science, whatever they have discovered so far. But those are things under the laboratory conditions.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so just wrapping up this episode, it is the imbalance of the glucose metabolism and not the issue of glucose in itself that causes or is harmful for the human body or
No.
causes diabetes.
Never.
Okay, I wanted to have this fact straight because glucose seems like a
Glucose is a much needed one. Without glucose, you can't survive.
you can't
cannot
survive,
live.
right? It is glucose is the very fuel for every single cell of the body.
Another important stuff is 2/3 of the oxygen that you breathe in is spent by the brain, because the reason at 75% of the glucose coming to your body is needed to the human brain, which is less than 2 kilos. If a person is
Yes.
60 kilos of weight, his brain is around 2 kilos, it uses 75% of the glucose coming in through your food and nutrition. The balance 58 kilos of your body takes only 25% of the glucose and 1/3 of the oxygen that you
Yes,
breathe in.
yes.
Yeah.
You've told us this before when we
Yeah.
spoke about carbohydrates.
Yes.
So glucose seems like something that's evil and to be avoided. We're going to stop this session here, and in our next episode, we're going to start looking at diabetes as a disease and understanding it better. So thank you so much
Thank you
for
very
this.
much.
Thank you very much for spending your quality time. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish you enjoyed this session. See you later.